Hello and welcome to NAB AFL Draft Night Live, or Draft Countdown Show, I should say. I've had 3 months to prepare for this, Cal, and I've stuffed up right from the top. I am Riley Beveridge. I'm joined by Cal Toomey, the busiest man in footy when it comes to November, and for the 11 months before that as well, you could just about say. Cal, how are you going?
Hey, Riley. Very excited. It's a big week, and we're excited. There's a lot of dreams that are going to be made on Wednesday and Thursday night. It's a dream of ours to be back on NAB AFL Draft Countdown. So there's plenty coming up on today's show. I'm looking forward to getting a couple of the guests in. We've got Jason Horne-Francis on the show, the number one pick. We've got Ben Hobbs and Marty Pask coming on the show soon. We've got Adrian Caruso, who's got the number 2 pick at the Giants. Kinnear Beatson, who's always good entertainment on Draft Night Countdown.
Very good for a laugh, Kinnear, isn't he?
Well,
he's very good at his job as well.
We'll see that too, but we'll see what sort of mood he's in today. So it's very close to the draft. Some big decisions are being made all around the country, and there's no doubt that as we get closer, we get a little bit more of an idea on how things are going to pan out.
Let's speak about that. We're about 50-odd hours away from the NAB AFL draft. We know about pick number 1, and we know what North Melbourne's going to do with pick number 1, and we're going to have Jason Horne-Francis on the show a bit later on. Where do things start to get interesting for you?
Well, they're interesting all the way through. I mean, that's a deserved pick 1. He's had a great season. He's been outstanding for a couple of years now, Jason Horne-Francis, and we'll talk to him about how he's dealt with that hype and experience over his time at South Adelaide as he embarks on the next stage of his career at North Melbourne. The Giants have held a huge key to how things are going to play out. They're taking Finn Callaghan. I've got no doubt about that at this point. And look, they've had their options throughout this period, and they've been weighing up the tolls and Mac Andrew and Josh Gibcus, Joshua Shelley. I'm not sure if Adrian Caruso is going to give us too much on with any certainty when he comes on the show, but the reality is I think everyone in the industry believes that's the way it'll play out. And beyond that too, Mac Andrew seems the man at the Suns after that. So, and I think will be the man. And that's where, when you're putting together the Phantom Draft, which will be out later tonight on afl.com.au, and I can't wait to get it out there.
Can't wait to read it.
There's a lot of people asking me when it's going to drop.
Can you give us an exclusive? What time?
I feel like Adele. It's just waiting to drop the 30, the latest album. Look, no, I don't know exactly.
Is that how many Phantoms you've done now? 30?
It's number 10, actually.
Is it actually?
It's number 10.
Happy 10th birthday. It's an
Thanks.
important milestone.
Yeah, thanks. A decade of doing the Phantom Draft, and I say it every year, but it is getting harder, and that's the advent of live trading has made it more difficult to know exactly who's going to go where. I remember the good old days of 2013, and I think we had the first 13 or 14 that year, and it was because they couldn't move. Yeah. It was a relative sort of ease in working things out. Not that it was easy at the time, but you look back and think, oh, well, we had a fair less to deal with. Getting back to tonight's Phantom Draft, and when you're looking ahead to Wednesday night's draft, the Hawthorn Footy Club clearly is in a position to really shape what happens inside that top 10. Of course, the Crows too, with Joshua Shelley's been so closely linked. We spoke about that during the trade period. They've also been looking closely at Josh Sin and Ben Hobbs, who we'll have on the show too. So I think they're the main options around that pick for the Crows selection. And then the Hawks, well, what do they do? There's so much discussion around Josh Ward and Matt Johnson. We spoke about Matt Johnson on afl.com.au and the Hawks' interest in him several weeks ago. And that's not dissipated. It's just a matter of weighing things up and what one versus the other can provide. Ben Hobbs is in that conversation as well. And Nazai Wanganeen-Malira has been really closely monitored too by the Hawks. So there's the really key part of that top 10 once you get through the opening few selections. And that's where putting together the next period of picks as well is difficult, because there is a real, I guess, ripple effect of what happens after that. We know Richmond are in there between the Fremantle selections, and there's all the sort of names that are right in that group, and Jai Amos and Hobbs, and what happens with Matt Johnson. So
it's also where the cat and mouse starts, because Fremantle has 6 and 8, as we know. Richmond has 7. They've got to weigh up who do we take at 6, knowing Richmond's got the pick after. And then you get into the latter stages of that first round where there's clubs with multiple picks in that mix. Like Richmond have more picks in the 20s, obviously, as do Geelong. But there's also Brisbane, who has 2 first-rounders late in the piece. So it's going to be interesting, isn't it?
Well, all of a sudden it leaves St Kilda in this position where they might get something that might not have been there previously or might not have been expecting. I think for the last period there's been a phase where which of the midfielders could get through or which of the speedy options could get through. Is it Josh Sin? Is it Nazai Wanganeen-Malira? Is it Josh Goda? Now, all of a sudden, they might be contemplating the fact that Josh Gibcus could get through as a key defender. And if you're the St Kilda Footy Club, what's your biggest area of need? You probably have a few different areas of need that really work for you. You need some class on the outside to complement the midfielders there. You need some tools that help out what you've sort of lost over the past couple of years in terms of key position players. So, yeah, it's a fascinating group beyond that sort of first three live selections. And, of course, we talk about Dacos and Darcy within the bids there and how they play out. You'd expect the Giants would look very closely at a bid for Sam Darcy and then Nick Dacos as well.
Plenty more
for Gold Coast too.
Plenty more to come on where picks might fall. I want to get to your arch nemesis though, pick trading. So where do you think
enemy?
Where do you think it starts and what clubs are eyeing off what at the moment?
Well, there's been a lot of talk around, does Adelaide slide back from 4 to 7 and get something in between as well? And if they wanted to do that...
Is there a chance Rochelle's there at 7 if they were to do that?
I don't think so. I think that'd be a risk. If they wanted Rochelle, they'd have to stay at 4.
Okay.
But if they wanted Josh Sin, they could move back to 7 and I think get him. So that's where what they want to do will probably be telecast in terms of the trade, whether they do it or not. Look, that's still an option. Whether it happens or not on the night, we have to wait and see. It was an option for them in the trade period to bundle up 7 and 15 and for 4, and Adelaide knocked that back during the trade period from the Tigers. Maybe they've warmed to the idea now. I don't think there's any discussions at this point that that's right on the frame of happening as we speak. So we wait and see. The interesting one that I want to talk about today is Greater Western Sydney's looking at trading out pick 13.
Yes.
So they've told other clubs they would absolutely look at trading that pick out for a future first-round pick, and I've spoken to clubs around that as well, or slide back a few spots and look at a future second-round pick to do that slide. So you might still get a player that you're interested in at 13 if you push back a few spots. But that's the risk in trading back, isn't it? You might not. So that's where all of a sudden clubs who are either interested in looking at getting another first-round pick in, so that could be another club who already has one and uses their future first-round pick to buy into an extra pick this year, a pick 13, which is probably going to be bounced out to pick 15 by the time it actually rolls around. So who's going to take up either of those offers? And I would think it would firstly depend on which players are there, clearly. And that's 1, if the Giants move, and 2, if another club is happy with the group in that bracket. So that's an option. But also, the other option as well is which club is in the position to give up a future first-round pick and say, well, let's hit this draft even harder than we have been planning to and take it on. So does Port Adelaide do that? Should they? I think at pick 12, they could bundle up and use a future first and say, well, if the right players are there and both of them are still there, there's still 2 that we might like at 12 and one of them's there at 13. We know that. Why not offer a future first to go and grab the Giants pick at pick 13?
They've got a good track record of hitting on the right players when they've got multiple picks in the first round, don't they?
They absolutely do. And they're in a position where, having drafted the terrific trio of 2018, Butters, Dersma, Rosie, and then Bergman and Georgiadis, they're actually in a really good spot in terms of their youth coming through, so they could probably afford to bundle up again. Bring in 2 first-round picks as a side that's played in back-to-back prelim finals, that puts you in a good spot. So that's one for the consideration. I think that they should do it or should have a look at it if the right players are there. Melbourne's been interested in moving up to 13 as well, as has Hawthorn. So could they do it with 21 and a future? Melbourne doesn't have the futures sort of in play as much. So they have 17 clearly, but that's all some mechanics to look at in the second half of the first round. And look, there's plenty of trade discussions happening as well. So these aren't all going to come to fruition, but you speak about clubs and you speak to clubs as what they do and how prepared they've got to be for the next period. And Essendon remains interested in getting a second round pick in if they can, using their future second. West Coast has looked at pushing up the board from pick 29 if that can happen. Richmond has looked at what it can do with its picks in the 20s and spoken to clubs around that too, something around there. The Bulldogs look likely to do a deal with Geelong that sees pick 23 go to the Cats, and the Dogs probably get back 32 and 34. So I'd expect that one to go through, particularly with the bid likely at pick 2. So that deal's, we've been talking about that deal since the trade period.
Yeah, been on the cards for a long time, hasn't it?
And that's, in the end, it's probably going to be one that happens very, very early in the piece, one when the gates are open. So that's the latest. And we'll wait and see what happens as we put it all together tonight.
All right, we know you take your Phantom Draft very seriously. If there was one pick that you could just know about right now, is it Hawthorn's at pick 5? Is that the one that you think makes or breaks your Phantom? And then later on in the draft for the hopes of a lot of clubs later on in that first round?
Yeah, Yeah, I'd like to know that one.
No one knew Will Day.
No one. Well, one person.
One person did. So you got a good track record with Hawthorn. We've got Mark McKenzie on the show tomorrow. Hawthorn's list and recruiting boss, so might get an insight there.
There's some other players as well that have fans earlier than have been sort of reported as well, and that we've previously reported. Campbell Chesser, how high could he go? Blake Howes does have interest, and both of those have interest in sort of that first 12, 13 picks as well. So there's no doubt that there's going to be some surprises as the draft unfolds and how things go from there. But I think the trading aspect is so intriguing because it can really just forget the phantom. It can throw an absolute spanner in the works in terms of everything and every club's plans. If a club is keen enough to push up the board and make a play of their own, because on draft night you're doing it for the player.
Yeah,
you're doing it for not necessarily the pick. It's about the player who's left on the board.
And that's the difference between the trade period, isn't it? When there's so many unknowns when you're trading for picks during the trade period.
There's not been many picks traded in the first round over the past couple of years. There's been, since it's open, there's obviously the Liam Stocker situation where Carlton ranked him in the top 6 in 2018. They did that one. Then Carlton was involved in the Sam Flanders deal where the Gold Coast Footy Club was keen to move up. Carlton didn't have Flanders ranked inside that top 10 group. They had Kemp ranked around 11, 12. They could get him a little bit later and get Sam Philpin as well. So there's a lot of talks that happen. In the end, not as much action.
Are they the only two?
I think so, yeah. We see a lot in the opening stages of the second round, and we will again on Thursday night. But these the discussions that has to be had before the night, though, because they're not just something that on a whim you can be trading first-round picks and make things happen from there.
How confident are you with the Dockers at the moment? Because I think they're another club, obviously, clearly that shapes the earliest part of that first round, 6 and 8. Do they go West Australian? Do they take a mix of what they like, or do they go best available? When you've got two picks that are so close together but apart, so 6 and 8, you got Richmond in between. What do you think they're waiting on?
There's no doubt a little bit of gamesmanship would have to be played there to make sure you can get the players you want, and there's absolutely no doubt that everyone's in for around the same players. There's Jai Amos, Ben Hobbs is on the show very, very shortly. I can see him now listening, and he'd be in that group as well for those clubs. Josh Gibcus is in that range too. So I think we've seen a few names shake out of that top 3 or 4 now. So we probably see the next group start to emerge and figure. So at this point, I think that those are the group. And we're all sort of waiting on how Hawthorn picks its cards, because Josh Ward is the other one who there's been so much talk around Hawthorn. You wrote the story around him earlier this year. He's got Hawthorn links. I think he's a very obvious pick for them to choose and lock in for 200 games. Matt Johnson, athletically, is fantastic. He's quick. He can use the footy so well. His versatility and agility is terrific too. So, there's some great options around that mark.
All right, plenty more to come on Draft Night Countdown. Got a few packages that we'll show you throughout the day. Here, the next one's one of your favourites, Cal. You've spoken about him a lot throughout the year, Arlo Draper.
Farmers there, outnumbered by the West Australians, and that's a terrific mark, standing under the high ball from Draper.
Yeah, I like to think I'm pretty versatile. That's probably one of my main strengths, is being able to play everywhere. So, I use that strength. I get thrown around a fair bit in games, but I like to play as a classy sort of clean guy that can use his skills well and kick the footy. I've got similarities to Connor Rozee from Port, just in his sort of agility and forward craft and a bit of X factor, but someone I'm modelling my game on is Nat Fyfe, because I've been watching him in his draft year, and he was a skinny kid, kind of just like me. Skinny kid who was a bit crafty with the footy. So I'm going to model myself on how he's developed and turned himself into that big midfielder that can go forward. So that's probably how I'm going to try and develop when I get to an AFL list. Yeah, I reckon versatility is the big one, just being able to play everywhere at a high level. Also kind of my speed, my agility, being able to create space for myself and for teammates is something I think I do pretty well, and I like to think I've got a pretty good head, so just make good decisions and stuff like that.
Unfortunately, there's an injury concern for both teams. Arlo Draper looks as though he's got his arm in a sling, so he is out of the game.
On grand final day, we were playing WA as a curtain raiser, SA versus WA in the 19s. So just tore my AC in my shoulder. Ball was coming at me, I tried to pick it up. WA boy just pretty much ran through me, so definitely came off second best. I'm able to do bikes and stuff now, so that's how I'm going to keep my fitness going. But yeah, once I'm out of the sling, it's just about slowly getting the strength back into it, and I'm hoping to be back for sort of the start of pre-season. It's every kid's dream to play sport at a high level, so I feel really privileged that I have the opportunity to kind of live that dream. You know, not many kids do. So yeah, I feel privileged, and it's just exciting to you know, get to work and see how it all goes and experience it, and something I'm really looking forward to.
All right, that was Arlo Draper. We've got another top draft prospect joining us on Draft Night Countdown, Ben Hobbs. G'day, Ben.
G'day, boys. Thanks for having me.
We've also got Ben's manager, Marty Pask from Capital Sports. Marty, how's things?
Good, thanks, boys. Good to see you both.
Ben, you're about 48 hours out from the big night now. How are you feeling?
Yeah, it's pretty nerve-wracking. I've been trying to keep myself pretty busy and take my mind off it, but you start to think about what potentially can happen, and yeah, just really excited.
You tell us what could happen. Where do you feel like you're going at the moment?
There's obviously a chance I could go into state, and there's a chance I could be at maybe a club I really, really like. So who knows? I'm open to everything, and yeah, I'm just really excited to get into it.
What's the club you really, really like, and what have your recent interviews been with clubs that are around your ballpark?
Yeah, I've met with Tigers pretty recently, and they showed a little bit of interest, and yeah, that could potentially happen, and yeah, maybe Freo as well could be a possibility, but yeah, really looking forward to both of them.
What about the Hawks and the Crows? How much time have you spent with those clubs around that top 5 or 6 mark?
Yeah, I think definitely the Hawks have shown more interest than the Crows. Yeah, that could be a possibility as well. So yeah, not 100% yet, but yeah.
What's it like to be in your position when you've got these clubs come around, you're seeing your name linked to different places? As you say, there's the possibility of staying in Victoria versus a big move potentially too. How do you sort of weigh those things up in your mind?
I think, yeah, as I said, I've been trying to keep myself pretty busy and haven't really looked into things throughout the year. With the injury, I was definitely looking into where I was sitting and what the go was there, but I think my anxiety and it got a bit too much just trying to think where all the possibility where I could go. But I'm just trying to keep my mind off it, and again, really looking forward to whether it's interstate or in Victoria.
Marty, how much of a read do you get on this sort of situation nowadays?
A lot better than I guess we used to. I think the dynamics obviously changed a lot now with being able to trade picks even up on into the night and through the draft with live trading. So it's a very interesting situation now that we're faced with draft, whereas probably 10 years ago and even back when I was going through it as a player, it was kind of you threw your hat in the ring and you waited a little bit, and sometimes you'd even players would be getting drafted potentially without even meeting a club or doing anything. So I think now it's become a real science and a real art, the draft, and making sure they can really nail down who is exactly going where at what pick and who potentially may be available to trade. And look, I mean, clubs are fairly good at keeping information close to their chests, as we know, but you do try and get an understanding. And I think the best thing for educating the young guys like Ben and their family is to give them some sort of a range or a guide as to, look, this is the potential opportunity and where it may sit. So nothing becomes a surprise. So I think by the time you get to draft night, you're pretty comfortable that nothing should really surprise you.
We've mentioned Hawthorn, Richmond, Freo. What are clubs getting in Ben?
Oh, well, for personally my experiences with Ben, I mean, you might have to block your ears here, mate. I mean, you might get a few compliments here, but he's just a really well-rounded young man, and it's a credit to his family. And I think I've said this before as to how, like, there are guys that you get to at this stage of their career, and we were only talking about it before. I mean, the draft really is, you get to the end of your junior career and you're about to start your senior career. And that's effectively what we're talking about. So in one way or another, on Wednesday night, his junior career finishes, and it's about then the step into senior football and how well these guys can take it. So some of it's a little bit of a jump, some are ready to go. Others might, need a little bit more time. But from my experiences, I just think mentally and physically, his jump into senior football shouldn't be that big a deal, and he should be able to take it on pretty well.
Just on that, Ben, do you look ahead at round 1 next year as a goal? Have you already set your mind on what your start of your AFL career looks like?
I definitely think I can make an impact pretty early, but I've also got in my head, if I go to a club with a strong midfield, I might have to change my role, or I might sit out for a few games. But I wouldn't like that too much. I want to get a part of it and make an impact and be a strong player straight away. So that's a goal of mine for sure.
Tell us about your time at Collingwood earlier this year and what you took out of it. A lot of people liken you to Taylor Adams in the way you play your footy and your approach to your footy as well. You're someone that you've studied a bit as well.
I think, the main thing what I got out of being at Collingwood was you see the players that are really there's no real formula on why they're who they are. The Scott Penderburys and the Taylor Adams and the Steele Sidebottoms. I'd walk out and they're doing touch when everyone else is eating lunch or on their phones in the locker room. So that was the key thing I took away was those players are putting in the extras. You
played a bit of senior footy throughout the year. What did that sort of teach you about the experience of playing against men and what you're going to be facing at AFL level next year?
I think I haven't actually played. I didn't play against men this year.
You played against when you were like 15.
Yeah, when I was 14 and 15. So that was really good for me. I got a lot out of that, and Dad was really keen on me doing that, and just feeling comfortable then against my own age group. And I think once you're in the AFL, it's against 30-year-olds, and they've had 10 years on you, so you've just got to make do, and you've got to be confident. So I think that's what I'll have.
And you captained Vic Country as well. What did you learn from that experience?
That was a really proud moment for me to be named captain. It was really happy. My family and I were really proud of it, and I'm pretty disappointed that we didn't get to have a championships to really be that leader. But yeah, I think it was really good. And this year, even at the Rebels, the boys were really connected. And same with Vic Country. And yeah, it's a shame.
Do you regret some of the things you've missed over the last couple of years and the experiences that have been robbed from you as a group and as a cohort? That's not just in footy terms, but in social terms, in schooling terms. It's a group that's lost a lot.
Yeah, definitely. I think it's been talked about a lot, but I think there'll be positives that come out of it for sure. I think now being able to be back to normal in some ways been really good for us, and we're not taking it for granted. So I think it goes, pros and cons for sure.
Marty, tell us about some of the other prospects in the Capital team this year who might get picked up.
I mean, as you were saying, Cal, it's been a really interesting year. We were actually talking about it off air just before that. I think it's going to be one of those years where we might see some guys that might go into next year's mid-season draft. From our team last year that we had guys like Sammy Durham who got to play a final for Essendon, your Lockie Brambles who came on a little bit later, Jai Newcomb played a lot for Hawthorn. But in this draft, obviously with Ben, we think Cooper Hamilton's got a really good chance. Austin Harris up in the academy with the Gold Coast Suns as well. And then there's other guys too that, COVID just came at the wrong time. I know you wrote an article recently, Riley, about Cam McLeod, who, he might just have to wait a little bit longer to be shown just a little bit more footy in the back part of or the front half of next year as well, which will be interesting too. So, look, there's so many complexities now with COVID, and I think, Kinnear Beatson is one of the best recruiters, as we know, going around, said in an article recently that there'll be guys missed. And that's going to be the reality of this draft and arguably last year's draft, that we're not going to see as many that are taken as usual, and there might be a bit of a hangover next year that guys will be taking and might just have to do it just through a different avenue.
A little bit more about Cooper Hamilton, who's probably one of your other better chances of being picked. How's he facing the next couple of days?
Yeah, so Johnny Meeson's done a lot of work with him in our office, and his time was super running, that 2K time trial, which shows his running power and his depth, that he can do it. But again, look, he came up to Melbourne, went to school, obviously would have liked to have played a little bit more footy himself, but wasn't given the opportunity to do with the world that we live in. But from all the feedback we get, his running ability, his running power has really separated him from some other guys, and we'll hopefully gets a chance this week.
And Marty, I know you're an ideas man, and Ben, if you haven't realised this yet, you'll find out. He is an ideas man. He's got views on sports around the globe. Do you think that draftees should be able to be drafted and then traded on draft night? Is that something that you've followed sports around the world? Could Ben on Wednesday night be selected by one club and then another club come and grab him?
Yeah, I love innovation in any sport. So let me preface this. So I don't mind it for the fact that I think at the moment we're looking at a trade, or for example, a draft where we're trading live picks. So the examples you're talking about is we'll see in other sports, they'll actually draft the player and hold the draft rights for that player before they actually then trade the pick. So the club or the team or the franchise is confident that that player has been selected, and then they trade for it. So in that essence, yes, I do like it, because you could see that there might be an interstate club or a local club that might particularly like a player. That player then becomes, I guess, an active AFL player. And then as an active AFL player, another club could then potentially trade for that player with a pick or another player. So, look, there's a lot of complexities to it, but I think as a game, I like how I like us evolving and trying different things and new things that potentially could, one, create interest, but also, two, you could also see list management and player movement and the art of it. And I don't think we should ever discourage from that, because I think the clubs that do list management well should be encouraged. And I think a move such as that would encourage that.
Ben, you've been described, and I've probably written about it as well. I know Riley has too. Can I say that? You've been described and I've actually written it. One of the most competitive players in the pool. Can you give us some examples for our listeners and watchers out there at the moment of your competitiveness outside of footy? So what stirs you? What grinds your gears? What are the things you'd never want to lose? You Connect Four guru, or like, is it everything and anything? Or give us something.
I think it's been, the amount of sport I have played throughout my whole journey, whether it's tennis, basketball, table tennis in the boarding house, cards, or even Fortnite, everything. I just want to win, and I don't see the point in just participating. And I think it really, gives me a point of difference with my footy, and it really helps my footy. And I think you know what you're going to get from me each week, and I'm going to put my best foot forward. So it's literally everything, but I've gotten better at having that balance for sure. And when I'm not around footy and not around sport, just to chill out a bit.
I reckon we spoke 2 or 3 months ago and you were trying to improve your golf game. Have you gone the last 2 or 3 months?
Well, through exams, I was shocking. It's going backwards, but we'll get better.
If you want to win and you'd like an easy win, you should try playing Marty in Fantasy NBA. That's the way to get an easy win.
I think I finished ahead of you. I'm pretty confident on record I did, but I had to put the fantasy basketball away. That just consumed me far too much, and you get emotional with players, particularly my beloved Clippers. I just couldn't not trade for a Clippers player.
So you'll be at the London Tavern on Wednesday night.
Yep.
Are you looking forward to the event? Are you sort of at the point now where you just want it to be done, or how's it going through your mind? Yeah,
I definitely want it to be done for sure, but really looking forward to having Marty there and having my family there and a few of my mates as well. It'll be a really good night, and I'm glad the AFL's put it together, and it'll be awesome.
Marty, while we've got you here, obviously one of the key free agents next year is Caleb Daniel. Mm-hmm. Negotiations underway there yet?
They're not underway yet, but we're going to catch up actually in the next couple of weeks. So, the footy club's reached out, and we're going to have initial chats and have a discussion around where everything sits. I think I've been quoted in the past as saying that, look, there's no time frame or no timeline, and certainly from our end, we're always happy to sit down and listen. He's been a great player for the Bulldogs. He's got himself a fantastic playing CV at that footy club, and we're always keen to have a chat with him.
Ben, Marty, thank you so much for joining us on Draft Night Countdown. Ben, in particular, good luck on Wednesday night, and hopefully your dreams come true.
Thanks, boys. Appreciate it.
Thanks, guys.
All right, plenty more still to come on NAB AFL Draft Night Countdown. We'll leave you with a taste of Neil Erasmus, West Australian midfielder.
Bell on the advance. Oh, that's a good mark. Is it our man Erasmus? It is.
I have the luxury of being able to play in the midfield, which I've learned the last 2 years, just practicing that craft. And same with the forward line. I'm able to get on the scoreboard a fair bit. Push forward and back into defence. So my running ability is something that I like to use against other midfielders and other forwards. So that's one of my work rate's one of my strengths, and then also my overhead marking really allows me to go forward and take some marks down that end, and also in the back line. And then probably the other main strength of mine would be my ability to read the ball. So in that sense, I think AFL players I sort of look up to in the midfield would be like Clayton Oliver and Elliot Yeo, those sort of players. I got just a normal sort of corky that sort of most players would get. It was in a school game, second last school game of the year, got a scan that night, and yeah, it was pretty 15 centimetre hematoma, a fair bit of bleeding. So yeah, it wasn't great, and yeah, we sort of went from there. Yeah, and I was pretty patient with things, and yeah, I'm reaping the rewards now. I'm able to go out and start running this past week, and yeah, looking to ramp things up in the next few weeks. Yeah, so really exciting times for me anyways, because I haven't been able to do a whole lot for the last 6 weeks. So yeah, no, it's going well. Yeah, I'm really fortunate the position I'm in, so yeah, I'm grateful for the people around me that sort of got me to this position. So yeah, it's exciting times. I'd just be happy to end up anywhere really, and I'd be stoked regardless. So yeah.
That was Neil Erasmus. Cal, did you glean anything from Ben Hobbs as to where he's going? Did it make your life slightly easier ahead of tonight's Phantom Draft?
Well, he's spoken to Richmond over the weekend, as he said, so they've clearly got an interest there in him. There's a lot of other good players in that bracket, though, so it's going to depend on what happens. It was interesting that he's spoken around the Hawks and the Crows' interest there, and clearly I think we know what his preference is. He hasn't made any secrets about that, but that's fine too. This is why they're top-rung players. They sort of get a little bit of a look at the clubs that are in their mix, and I think we've seen the competitiveness in him, the attitude that he's got, the hard-headedness he's going to bring to a footy club straight away. So that's an appealing prospect in a lot of ways.
If I'm a Hawthorn fan, I'm listening to that and thinking when he said the thing about Fremantle and Richmond, you're probably getting a glimpse that maybe the conversation might be more around Josh Ward or Matt Johnson for the Hawks.
Yeah, I think that's probably been the case for a little bit now. But those other guys have been in the mix, and it's also around what they've already got in their midfield versus what they're bringing in, what they can add to. James Warple, Sam Mitchell, as the senior coach, will want to find the right balance of midfielders in there, given Tom Mitchell is in there, given Jager O'Meara is in there as well. So, yeah, there's a fair few complexities to that big call, and that's why you take as long as you need. That's why they've got until Wednesday night. They don't have to actually know by now. I'm sure they probably do. But
how much do you reckon chopping and changing goes on for a club in that sort of pick 4, 5, 6 mix when you're not necessarily sure? They'd have a preference, wouldn't they?
Yeah, I think they'd have a preference, and you wait it out and you discuss the options, and you end up probably getting back to what your preference was. I think that's what would happen a lot.
Yeah, okay. It's going to be a very interesting next couple of days until we get there. We're going to speak to a man very shortly who knows all about these decisions and how they get made, and it's Giants recruiting boss Adrian Caruso, who's just joined us on Draft Night Countdown. Adrian, how you going?
Good, thanks, guys. How are you?
Very well.
We're well.
Do you know what you're doing at pick 2 yet? Have you made your mind up?
We're pretty close, yeah. Yeah, obviously it's been probably 3 months since we had the pick, and yeah, rather than jumping to any decisions early on, our process is always do the work and see where it lands. And obviously, yeah, now with a couple of days to go, we feel like we're pretty close.
How long have you been close?
In
inverted commas.
When you're going through the process, you always have, I suppose, an idea of who you think might be the one, and it's not until you're finished doing everything that you can really say that you're really settled. But I feel like if you make your mind up really early, and you don't do the work, well, you just don't know what might happen, and you close yourself off to a whole heap of opportunities or things that might present. And it's hard when you're picking at the top end of the draft and there's good players around. So we feel like we've gone through all the work, we've done everything, and now we're kind of like, okay, well, we feel like we know what we're doing now.
Finn Callahan's a really good player. Tell us about him.
He is a very good player. He's someone who, I suppose, at the start of the year, no one really knew who he was, and we watched some of those preseason games at RACA Park, I think they were.
It was in the wet. There was Jacob Edwards going up and taking a couple of marks.
Yeah, no, it was. And when there's a new player that comes along, you sort of take notice. And at the start, no one really knew exactly how good he would be. But the more we watched him, obviously he stood out, and that's why he's one of those guys that's in consideration for that pick.
This might be a bit of a silly question, but how much easier does it make your job when you know what North Melbourne is going to do at pick 1? If say Nick Dacos, for example, was in the open pool and there was still the debate going on as to what player they were going to pick, how easy does it make your job?
It's a lot easier. Yeah. It's a lot less. There's a lot less fewer scenarios. That we have to go through. Like if we didn't know what they were doing, we'd have to run through all the possibilities of Horn Francis being there, and would we pick him? So we'd have to do all the work on him. Would we trade the pick? We'd have to do all the work on the trade scenarios and seeing what offers would come, because ultimately the offers that came for him at 1, you would think that they might have come at 2 as well.
Yep.
And obviously clubs have come to us for pick 2, but no one's come with the offers that to the level of what they came for him. So it has made it a lot easier.
What would have moved you on pick 2, do you think, when you, as you say, Adelaide offered 3 first-round picks for pick 1, essentially, and Richmond offered a truckload and more and a player for pick 1? What do you think would have actually made you stir your mind and say, oh, okay, maybe we do look at pushing back 1 or 2 or 3 spots?
I think we obviously never got close to having the conversation, and that's at least keeping our options open and waiting this whole time before settling on something meant that if it did happen, it would have given us a good chat to have, and we would have had a debate. I don't think there's, that sort of offer. You can't just say, oh, well, we're just going to dismiss it and not consider it. Like, ultimately, we're here to do what's best for the footy club. And picking at that end, we know there's good players. If we had to move back a few spots, we're going to get good players. And that's been the challenge of trying to work out what we're doing is, there's 3 or 4 really good players here, and they're all different types. The types of players of the 4 guys that we've considered are so different, and some fit our list needs more than others. And that's why I suppose it's been hard for us to really, hone in and say, well, this is what we're doing, because there was always a possibility, what if we could get 2 of these players instead of 1? Is that better? And what if you could get a future pick as well? So that's why, if those offers came, absolutely we would have listened.
You talk about the list management piece of it, and I think I've written a couple of times that as a footy club, you guys have to use the draft a little bit more for list management than some other clubs do and have in the past. So when you're weighing up such a big pick right at the top end, how much is it a consideration when you say, oh, well, there's a small forward there in Rochelle or a key back in Gibkiss or a ruck, anything in McAndrew? How do you sort of come to that decision? Well, you know what, the best player could be the guy who we don't actually have the biggest need for.
Yeah, it's a massive factor. We've had to weigh all that up. And, when you're going through trade period, you don't know. We thought for a period there we might have been getting in a player that might fit a list need. And so once you get through all that and you get to the end of it and you're going to say, okay, well, this is where we're at. We've done all the work. These are the players and these are the positions that they're going to fit on our board. We ultimately just have to make a call on, what's the best decision. Even though, they're all different, that we've got the same level of confidence in all of them to come in and play AFL footy. Like, they're all going to be very, very good players. It's more of it's a list management decision more than a recruiting decision when you're coming down to those sorts of things. And that's why we've taken the time to work out, what's the smart thing for our footy club? Is it to draft another midfielder? Is it to draft a ruckman, a key back, or a small forward, all of who are very good players? And, splitting them on talent is really hard.
When you did the deal with Collingwood as a football club last year, could you have imagined that you'd wind up with pick 2 12 months on?
No, I don't think anyone could have, no. It's nice in hindsight to say, oh yeah, we
claim it. No, claim it. Yeah. We saw it happening.
we thought pick 8 to 12 would be the range. They had a good year last year. They made the finals. They won a final. No one could have foreseen what was going to happen this year. And even up until 3 or 4 weeks before the end of the season, that pick was sitting at 5 or 6, and I was probably thinking, oh well, it's still a great pick. Like, I'll be wrapped that it's going to be 5 or 6. For it to land the way it did after round 23 where it's pick 2, it just gave us great flexibility over these last few months to look at all these options and wait and see what might happen, what trade offers would come. And just doing the work on these guys has made us realise how lucky we are, I guess, to be in that position.
You haven't been a club in the past that's made arbitrary bids on players, so that's not something that you've done. Will you be bidding on Sam Darcy or Nick Dacos at pick 2? And if so, how do you weigh up the view where you're bidding on a player that deep down you're not going to get, but how do you sort of get to that point of that decision one way or the other?
Yeah, I know it's a big talking point and everyone wants to know. We actually we're just about to have that discussion in the office.
Of course you are. Of course you are.
It's always right after they speak to us.
It's amazing how that works, right? We have such bad luck. We got to fix our scheduling.
Ultimately, as you said, we don't make arbitrary bids. We've never done it, but bidding is part of the draft. So, bidding on a player and knowing you're not going to get them and then getting the next best player, that's part of the draft. Everyone's been in that boat and, if we think that the Darcy or Dacos fit above the player that we're going to draft, then we'll bid. We don't play games or anything like that. We're just like, if this is where we think they fit on talent, and we would pick them if they were in the open draft, then we'll call the name out. So that's how we'll approach it when we make that decision in about an hour's time.
Can you let us know when you make that decision?
We're still on air. We're still on air. Has his godfather had an influence in the decision? So for those who are just tuning into Draft Night Countdown, of course, Sam Darcy's godfather is Giants coach Leon Cameron, clearly an old teammate of Sam's father, Luke.
Leon's actually, he's been a mentor for Sam, and he's been talking to me about Sam for a while and sort of saying, this kid could have some upside and things like that.
When did he first call it? Do you remember? Before this year?
16s, he was chatting to me about him, and I was sort of saying, I think he's miles off based on what I've seen. And he was, Sam. But then I remember sort of chatting to Leon after I think Sam had played 2 games, and I said, this kid's a jet. And he's like, I didn't want to say too much to you because I wanted you to figure out for yourself. But he's like, I know he can play, and he's going to be a good player. And I think, I was onto it very early about Sam, and not saying that was just me, but I think it was pretty clear when you watched him early on, there's not many players who have his set of attributes. And so, I think he's one that is obviously, if he was in the pool, he'd be going in that early range for sure.
Do you expect, as things stand, to be picking at 13?
As it stands, I'd say, yeah, probably. Yeah. We've made some calls and done some work on some options. I think, we feel like 13 is it's an interesting spot of the draft, and we've had a lot of teens picks in the past, and we're trying to make the best decision and learn off the ones that have failed in the past, and try and do what we've done with the ones that have succeeded. Given how this draft's going to pan out, we might sort of just fall just behind some guys, and then be picking someone that other clubs might see as you could trade back and get him. Ultimately, though, I think we'll end up just picking.
Yep.
But to be prepared, we need to make the calls in the lead up on, sliding back or trading out completely. Because if you don't have those things lined up beforehand, then it's really hard on the night when you're on the clock to ring up a club and say, oh, hey, do you want to give us your 13 when they're not prepared for it. So we've done all that prep work. But, I think ultimately we'll have an order of players, and I'm pretty confident that one of those guys will be there at the pick and we'll just pick them.
Is that one more of a needs-based conversation, do you feel?
Depending on what we do at 2, because if we get one of our needs players at 2, then we rate a player on talent at 13, then I'd be happy to do it that way. Otherwise, I think 13 makes sense for us to be more of a needs pick because, we do have 2 or 3 pressing needs that I think that we sort of look at our list and say, okay, well, if you could get it all at either end, it'd be good, and if you could get a small forward. So if we don't pick one of them with pick 2, then I think at 13 it would be smart for us to look at that type, and that's where potentially trading back and still getting one might be an option. But ultimately, I think we'd probably just keep the pick and pick.
Where do you expect a bid to come for Josh Fahey, your academy player? He's the leading Northern Academy player of 2021. What's the read on him? Yeah,
I think from all reports, it's probably going to come in the second round somewhere, and that's sort of around the planning that we've done has been around that. Josh has been in our academy since 13 or 14, and we obviously lobbied pretty hard to keep him in there. This is what the academy's for. We feel like we've developed him and helped him get to a level, and if he's a second round talent on draft night, I think it's a good result for us and the footy club and for Josh.
He's got a pretty interesting story in the sense that he moved to Queensland for a little bit of his younger life and left the Giants Academy for a year or so. Was there any point this year where you thought you might not have access to him?
I think when he moved back to Queensland last year, there was probably a period where we thought, okay, well, he's gone. He's probably not going to – we didn't know he'd be coming back, and we probably thought it's going to be hard for us to get access. I think once he decided – he was only there for 8 or 9 months in the end and didn't play any footy last year because there wasn't much footy to be played. When he came back later last year and started pre-season, come straight back in the academy and that sort of thing, all we knew we would do was, put a case into the AFL. That's all we can do. We put the case in. We didn't know, yes, definitely they'll let him in, or yes, definitely they'll say no. We just thought we'll present the facts and the case, and we think it's good for him and for us if he's still in our academy. And it was up to the AFL to do their work and come up with a decision. And to our benefit, he's actually, he's been given the tick of approval for us.
Now, Adrian, this is the 3rd year of Draft Night Countdown. You've been a regular on every year, and we appreciate you coming in again today. We've actually got a song coming up later today. Are you going to be sticking clear when you get back in the car now and go back to that important meeting about the bidding?
We've got the meeting, so that's more important.
Are you sure? Are you sure you can't flip us on? We're on every phone at the minute. We're on every phone, we're on every laptop, every device.
We could have it on in the background while we're discussing things.
It's coming
If
later.
it'll make you happy.
We'll take your call live if you want to let us know once this meeting's done.
What time are you on until?
You tell us. You tell
I
us.
think we're at about 2:05 when we're making that call.
That's a shame. Adrian, thank you so much for joining us on Draft Night Countdown.
No worries, thank you.
As we go to the break, we'll take a look at some highlights from the likely number one pick in waiting, Jason Horne-Francis.
Not a good handball through there towards Schiller, and Horn should make them pay, and does with his second goal.
As a player, I think I'm just a tough inside ball winner. Loves a competitive contested ball side of it, and but I can also use it on the outside and got good tackle pressure, and just really tough player. Yeah, the strength in my game, I think, are my contested ball and competitiveness. I think. I think it's a really good asset to have, and for me, and but I think my marking and my skills as well, and clean hands around stoppages is really good. I think my best position is that more mid forward type of role. I love being around the ball and being around bodies and just hunting the footy. So I think that as well, and then going down forward and just showcasing my strengths, my marking ability, and my goal sense. So modelling my game, really like Nat Fyfe and the way he goes about his footy and the way he prepares, and so he's really big on his preparation, and I really like that about him. And I think maybe in game it's more a bit of Patrick Dangerfield about me, just explosive out of stoppage, and look, Fyfe and Dangerfield can both go forward and damage you on the scoreboard as well, which I think is good. Yeah, the hype. I feel like I'm usually pretty good with that side of footy, I guess, and the mental side of it. Dad keeps me out of it pretty well, and keeps me level-headed, and it's pretty hard. You got a mum that every time she sees it on Facebook posts about it, and it's up there, so you see it a lot. But I try to stay out of it mostly. Ahead of the draft, look, I'm just really excited to get it all over and done with, really, and know where I'm going, and just have footy, I guess, is a full-time job, and do what you love every day. I'm really excited about that.
That was Jason Horne-Francis there. We were just joined by Adrian Crusoe, Giants recruiting manager. We've got his crosstown rival, Kinnear Beatson from the Swans, joining us now. Kinnear, how you going?
Going well, thanks, Riley.
I think we're 3 from 3 now on Draft Night Countdown. Thanks for joining us again.
My pleasure.
You're starting at pick 16 this year. What do you think will be available to you at the spot?
No. Who are you picking? We got you in for a reason. Pick 16. Who are you picking?
Next dumb question, Cal.
That was the first one.
Well, if we had pick one, mate, I could tell you. But pick 16, it's going to be a fair few selections, 15 in fact, in front of us. We've got our order, and we'll just wait and see.
You must have an idea by now who's going to be in that range.
Yes.
Can you give us some names?
No.
The Swan supporters out there are desperate to know some names.
I might let them know if they ring me.
Okay, well, 04.
2-5.
How you placed when you look two days out? Are you interested in what's coming ahead of you, or are you actually pretty comfortable with the group, regardless of what's going to be there?
Now, the knowledge of what we've got of the players that are going to be drafted before us is pretty limited this year. Some years you go in and you've got a fair idea how it's going to pan out. But I think this year, because Fremantle, GWS, I think Brisbane, they've all got a couple of picks. So it seems to me that no one's really showing their cards at this stage, because they're just waiting to see whether they can get a group of players that they really rate, and in what order they might need to call them to be able to achieve that.
If I was to rattle off some names, could you tell me if you think they'll be there or not? Do you think?
Oh, yeah.
Do you think someone like a Tom Brown or a Josh Goda, do you think they'll still be there? Blake Howes?
They'll all be around the mark, I would think.
Would they be in your consideration?
They'll come under consideration.
This is the straightest bat I've ever seen.
In a mood. You get in a bit of a mood 2 days out from the draft.
Game day.
Game day's approaching. When you moved back from pick 12 to 16, are you looking at a different, as part of the Peter Laddams deal, are you looking at a different group of players now than you were then, or are they similar in actually the rankings that you've got, that you think you might actually get one of the guys that you thought was there regardless if you stayed at 12?
It's fair to say that when we made that decision to move back in the draft to secure Laddams, our national recruiting manager, Simon Dalrymple, burst into tears and took up a fetal position on the floor, banging his fist. Look, no, I don't think the same group will be there. It was a big call, but to be able to get a young ruckman in an era when ruckmen are hard to get, I mean, you've only got to look at the fact that Shane Mumford's renominated for the draft to give you an idea that securing ruck stocks is a really difficult thing to do. So to be able to do that through the trade period, to get something significant in, you've got to be able to give up something significant, and that was what we elected to do.
Is there a need you want to cover?
Not specifically. It's quite obvious that we've lost George Hewitt and Jordan Dawson, both that can play through the midfield, so midfield's concern. Key position stocks, quality key position stocks, but I don't think that's a strength of this draft, in my opinion. And I think they'll go early, those that are, from what I'm hearing. So that's Gibcus and Amiss and these type of players, they'll be gone. And some running type players, yeah.
Would you bid on Josh Fave? We just saw a crossover of people in your seat. We had Adrian Caruso, the Giants recruiting boss, in here just a moment ago.
I heard what he had to say, and in light of that, 100% we bid. Hate them with a passion.
Oh, that's good.
You're just giving the thumbs up to Liam Pickering there, who is Tom Brown's manager, actually.
I know that.
A little bit of correspondence between you two of late to see Tom.
I've left that up to Simon, but he has been in contact with most of the managers to try to get some sort of feel of the clubs that are interested where our picks fall.
3 or 4 picks for you. How do you see the night sort of planning out from that way?
I quite like where our picks are positioned at 16, 31, 39. I quite like that. I mean, we'll be open-minded about trying to come forward, especially with that second pick. So we're talking to the Bulldogs about 23, but I don't think we're going to be able to satisfy Sammy with what he wants. That's going to occur pretty quickly, I would think, on the night. In fact, I reckon he'll have a deal in place before he goes in, given the bid for Sam Darcy's going to come early. Once you're on the clock, you can't match it. So, you can't get a trade going then. Sorry, I've lost the line of the question.
How many picks?
Definitely 3, possibly 4.
Would you, in terms of the interest in moving up to 23, that was obviously to package up the picks in the 30s, so would you try and do that with someone else, potentially on night 2 or even late night 1?
Yeah, look, our plan is to just sort of see who's gone on night 1 and then reassess in terms of what the numbers look like and who might get through 31, 39. Because I still think midway through first round of this draft, it could start going all over the place. It's just going to be one of those drafts. All clubs, we've hardly seen the Victorian kids play. We haven't seen, well, I know in our particular club, we haven't seen the South Australian WA players play live a lot, so that makes it difficult. We'll reevaluate it on Thursday morning.
With where you're picking on Wednesday night with 16, it's likely to be 18 by the time it comes around to your pick. There's another factor that you're going to have to weigh up this year, which has been different in the past, that clubs with academy players in Victoria and won't have access to players before pick 20. Someone like a Mitch Owens, for example, who's probably going to be around that mark. Do you think it will change the way going forward clubs evaluate talent in that range, knowing that they won't have access to them in just a few picks' time? Like a player like Owens, he might be there if you pick in the 30s in a year gone by, but this year you can take him at 18, for example, and the club won't have access to match.
Yeah, I understand totally what you're saying, Riley. I think the answer to that question is it depends on who you would bypass to elevate, say, a Mitch Owens in front of the players that you're bypassing. So we've been through that scenario this morning. I can't tell you what our answer is. But yeah, it would always been evaluated against who else is available at the time. I think it would be fraught with danger to do that just to try to be cute and get ahead of the curve, if you like. Again, it would depend on who you're passing on.
Looking a little bit ahead, just a little bit, a few weeks, Paddy McCartan's bypassed the NAB AFL draft. He's not nominated. So joining the dot stat suggests that he's likely to join the Swans as a pre-season supplemental period selection?
Yeah, we're waiting on some feedback from the AFL regarding that. He qualifies to just go straight through because he's been off an AFL list for over 12 months, so he doesn't need to nominate for this year's draft or the pre-season or rookie draft. All I can say is that we're waiting on some information back from the AFL. If that's all positive, there's every likelihood Paddy will be with us.
And what sort of role, ticking that all off, it's all okay. What sort of role would you see him playing? He obviously entered the system as a key forward, big hulking half forward who could move up the ground a little bit but was better inside 50. He played some back stuff last year in the VFL. Where do you like him?
Last year we were having a look at him at both ends of the ground. He was playing forward when he got reported and then suspended for a number of weeks. Then on return he was playing back and looking comfortable, and towards the end of the season he did his hamstring. I think it was the second last game anyway. So both ends, Cal, to be honest with you. I mean, he's got the flexibility to play both ends, and it's good for your list profile if you've got players that have got the capacity to do that. And that's one of the reasons why we offered Sammy Reid another year, because Sammy can play both roles and worst case scenario can go into the ruck and pinch hit there. So, yeah, you've got to be able to give your coaches enough flexibility with your list.
Did this year surprise you at all in terms of the rise of the Swans that we saw across the season? Did you think that you were about ready to make that jump back up? Or this has been a footy club that's not used to what we saw the past couple of years before that? Did you think you were about ready to turn the corner as quickly as maybe you did?
Yes and no. 220, we didn't have a great run with injuries. We didn't have Lance play much. So the fact that we had the majority of our better players on the list for most of the season certainly helped. And a lot of the younger players really jumped up. So the likes of McInerney and Warner, you don't expect Errol in his first year to come in and have the season that he did. So a bit of a balance there. Not overly shocked, but pleasantly surprised, yeah.
And a quick couple from me. Does that change the way you look at your list going forward and how you evaluate and make decisions now? The fact that they have managed to take that rise probably a bit quicker than what a lot of people expected?
In terms of the type of players we'll look at,
yeah,
or whether you trade in or
whatever?
That
sort of...
Look, it's always a complicated sort of situation, Riley, because you've got TPP limits, etc., that you've got to work into it. So your salary cap, the number of players that are in contract that play certain positions. So you're balancing all that up. One of the things we wanted to do with Sammy Naismith not going to be available this year is to get that ruckman in, a young one, to support Tom Hickey. It's no secret, Tom's 30. He's got a bit of a PCL issue, had a terrific year last year, but who knows? He might get another knock on that PCL and we need someone else to come in. So through that trade period, the delisted free agency period, you can try to top up and hit certain needs on your list through that period, whereas it's not as easy to do that through the draft.
And you'll have one of the competition's best free agents next year in Isaac Heaney. Have talks started there about potentially re-signing him longer term?
Yeah, our GM of footy, Charlie Gardner's opened up the conversations with his manager, Ben Williams, about a contract extension. I'm not exactly sure where that's at because we've only got back to training today, but yeah, we'd be hopeful of being able to retain Isaac and would understand that he will be one of the more highly sought-after free agents if it got to that stage.
Well, we've got Ben Williams on the show in about half an hour, so we'll get his view on that one too. So we'll see if they match up.
That'd be fine.
Hey, thanks for coming in. We appreciate it.
My pleasure, Cal and Riley.
Always one of the best.
How's your day been?
It's good. Do you want to hang around? We've got Jason Horne-Francis coming on next, and then the song. So if you're more than willing to, or if you want to just hang around and sort of throw a few questions into Jason Horne-Francis if you want. Have you interviewed him?
Early on in the year via a Zoom call.
How was he?
In terms of, no, he was good.
Just presence?
Yeah. No, he's a lively young character. Knew how he played, what he wanted to achieve. Impressive from that perspective.
You said to Cal earlier before, if we had pick one, I'd tell you. If you did have pick one, who would you be taking?
Open draft.
Oh, open draft.
Oh, that changes things.
Okay. Now, I always find this question difficult without sitting on the fence because you haven't done the same amount of due diligence on players that you know aren't going to be there. But I really do like the way Sam Darcy goes about it as a key forward. Like, he's only light at the moment, but he fights hard for front position, takes the ball at the highest point. He's a good set shot. Seems like a ripping young bloke.
Would be a good partner for Logan McDonald.
Yeah. I'll settle on Sam. There you go.
Okay. That's good. We love that. All right, Kinnear, thank you so much for joining us on
My
NAB
pleasure,
AFL
guys.
Draft
Have a
Night
good day.
Countdown. Really appreciate it.
We're going to leave you to it, Kin.
Good on you guys.
Thank you.
Go back before that stinking.
We're still on.
Are we? I was going to go crook at that parking officer.
All right. What do we got next, Ross?
We've got a few things going ahead next. We've got Jason Horn-Francis will be joining us in just a couple of seconds. We're going to get that parking officer on. He'll be joining us very soon.
What do we think they're doing after that? Who do we think they're picking? I mean, I think that the Brown conversation is real. I think that Howes...
I think Tom Brown is in that mix for him.
I think Blake Howes is a genuine option for them as well. So that was a good one to look at, I think, for a lot of clubs in that period of the draft too. There's Brisbane and Hawthorn. I think if he got that far, I think Melbourne would look at him as well. Yeah, so it's an interesting part of the draft, that period, because there are some players that I think clubs would be hoping can get through. Can they squeeze out? Is someone who's going to be the guy who squeezes out of the top dozen? Because there will be one, particularly if the Giants choose more on need at 13. If they hold that pick, does that trigger a bit of a ripple effect afterwards to see a little bit of a change in that part of the draft?
So what is the difference between picking at 12 and 16? Like, what are they going to be getting a player that's in a different bracket, or do you think it would have been the same sort of players they'd be looking at?
No, it's going to be a different bracket because at 12, look at the guys we're talking about with Port Adelaide at the moment. It's Wanganeen, it's Sin, it's Erasmus. Those are the package of potential pickups there. There's Matt Johnson, who could potentially get there. Those are the names. We're not talking about those guys 4 picks later, are we? So that's where there is a difference, and the shuffling of picks will mean that any one of those names could get to Port Adelaide, or maybe a couple might even be available potentially if there's a surprise inclusion into that group. However, I don't think any of them are going to be there at 16. So that is the more difficult part of it.
All right, Cal, we've got a very special guest joining us on NAB AFL Draft Night Countdown. Over the line from South Australia, we've got the pick one in waiting, Jason Horn-Francis. Jason, thanks for joining us.
It's all right, mate. Thanks for having me.
How are you feeling? You're about 50-odd hours out from the big moment. How's the nerves?
Yeah, they're not too bad. I'm just really excited to, I guess, see what's happening and, get stuck into things.
Now, Jace, we've got you on the road, I think. You're about to play a game of golf. Is that the way to relax ahead of the biggest night of your life?
Yeah, it kind of gets my mind off things, I guess, a little bit.
How do you hit them?
Oh, not too bad. I've played playoff about 15, 16.
Jeez, it's all right. It's going well.
What's been the latest communication with North Melbourne, mate? Obviously, there's been so much talk across this year about the Roos. How have your chats with them been?
Yeah, they've been pretty good. Pretty informative, and they seem like they're pretty interested, which is really good. So I'm really keen.
When was the first time you started to really look at North Melbourne as a potential destination for you? And were you studying the ladder and the machinations of wins and losses at the end of the season, thinking about what it would mean for your future?
No, I don't think so. Look, I think they've got a bright future. They've got a lot of young players there and a good coaching and support staff around them. So I think, they're going to be a good club in a couple of years.
Have you wanted to be the number one pick? Was it a goal of yours going into the season?
I think at the start it was just kind of try to get drafted, and then I guess when my name got in the door a bit, that was our goal to go number one, me and the family's goal. So it's been good to I guess get to that expectation and goal that we set.
Now, my colleague here, Cal Toomey's written a number of times throughout the year about the big offers that have come in from sides, most notably from Adelaide and Richmond to North Melbourne for that number one pick. What was going through your mind when you heard that clubs like the Crows, like the Tigers, would be willing to give up so much to get you to their football club?
Yeah, it was obviously a really, really big honour for them clubs to put up what they put up, and yeah, I kind of didn't look to it too much and tried to just focus on doing what I can control and stuff like that. So yeah, I didn't look into it too much, but yeah, it was obviously a big honour to have clubs like that put what they put up for me. So yeah, it was good.
Have you thought about next year much yet, Jace? Is it something that has occupied your mind a lot around what next year looks like for you, where you want to fit into a team, how early you can play? How quick has that been onto your mind when you look ahead to 2022?
Yeah, it's been on my mind a little bit this past, week, getting a bit closer to it now, and yeah, I'm just really excited, to get started, and hopefully I can make an impact straight away, and which I think I'm pretty confident, and our family's pretty confident I can, and so yeah, I'm just really excited to get started.
Now, you've played some great senior footy over the past couple of years at South Adelaide, and some big finals and huge games against experienced players. How much does that help you? Because I think there's been times watching you play that you've been physically targeted and there's been some combative nature of opponents and how they've maybe gone after you a little bit at different points. But how has that prepared you for what happens next?
Yeah, sure. It's helped me tremendously. Having that 2 years of league footy under my belt, getting used to the bigger bodies, it's really helped me and my development. And obviously Jared Wright, the senior coach at South, has helped me a lot with that. I think it's obviously going to be a massive help for me. Obviously the speed's going to step up a little bit, but I think I'm ready for that.
You've obviously played a couple of different positions as well for South Adelaide throughout the year. We saw you forward in that prelim and you were awesome, and you've gone into the midfields at times as well. Where do you see you starting your career at North Melbourne?
Oh, look, I see myself as a mid forward, and I'm to be honest, I'm happy to play wherever they feel is best for me, and I think I could maybe push for a midfield spot, but I think a half forward mid is perfect role for me.
And you played with a former number one pick as well this year at South Adelaide in Bryce Gibbs. Has he given you much advice over the last couple of weeks about what to expect ahead of the big night?
Yeah, he has a little bit, and he's been tremendous for me and all the young fellas at South this year, and I can't thank him enough for what he's done for us and taken us under his wing, and so he's been tremendous.
Do you start to think about what jumper number you're looking at, Jace? It's been such a thing where everyone sort of has a gut feel, a very good feel on what's going to happen on Wednesday night, but do you even look at that sort of detail when you look at a club that you might land at?
I think for me, not really. I kind of just take it as it goes and embrace the moment that I'm in at the moment. So for me, it's not too much fun at the moment.
Has it felt like a long time to get to this point, Jace? Like when you get through the start of the year, it's always so far down the track, the draft. You play footy, you play some championships games, you play some finals, as Rolly mentioned, in the sample. It all keeps ticking over, but has the last little period dragged for you when it's been so close in some ways?
Yeah, it has a little bit. Counting down the days a little bit and waiting for the draft night to actually happen. It's been it's a patient wait for me, but I'm just, like I said, excited.
We've all sort of known throughout the year at different stages. It's been reported, obviously, about North Melbourne's interest and that sort of stuff. When did you sort of get an indication that, yes, you were going to be the number one pick? And have North actually told you outright?
No, they haven't said anything to me yet. Still waiting and still a bit of a mystery. But I'm just really excited, and hopefully they do that and pick a number one. I'll be really happy. But I don't mind. Whatever happens.
Now, obviously, with the champs not going ahead this year, I think we're all robbed of the Nick Dacos, Jason Horne-Francis matchup. How do you personally think you would have fared in that one? And do you think do you get a bit annoyed sort of with all the challenges that we've had over the last couple of years that you weren't able to go up against the best in the country?
Yeah, look, it would have been I think fun for everyone to watch and fun for, I guess, me and Dacos for us to go up against each other. But I think we're both on the right track, and I'm really happy for him and what he's doing for the footy community and the draft. So, I'm just really happy for him as well.
What's draft night look for you, Jason? Adelaide Oval? Are you taking your family and a friend, or how's it sort of set up for you on Wednesday night?
Yeah, I'll take my family down there, my nana, and then a couple of my mates. I've invited them down there as well. So it should be a really good night.
Jason, thank you so much for joining us on NAB AFL Draft Night Countdown, and good luck on Wednesday night.
Thank you very much. Thanks for having me, boys.
Hey, Jace, before we let you go, a real quick one. We've got a song coming up, and you're going to feature a little bit. So I'm interested in some feedback from you in about 20 minutes. I might just shoot you a message just to make sure you've caught it, and we want some feedback. So just keep an ear on AFL Draft Night Countdown while you're got the golf clubs out.
All right, sweet, no worries.
Good stuff. See you, mate.
That was Jason Horne-Francis there, Cal. We've got a very special guest that's about to join. I think the boss is joining. The boss, is that what it says? That can't be right.
No, I think the boss is a bit later.
All right, before we do, we'll get to some highlights from one of the best key forward prospects in this year's pool, Jai Amos.
Does well. Hands it off to Regan. Sends it to the goal square. Mark taken. Amos, here he is again.
Strong contested marker. Good overhead. Able to get good separation on the lead. And has pretty good skills around the ground, and that's why I sort of model myself on Josh Kennedy. I've watched a lot of AFL, watched a lot of Josh Kennedy, just how he has a goal kicking routine. I came to get one that works for me, and then just using that consistently each week, and then taking it in.
Probably just do the traditional, hopefully.
Good call. Yep, a couple of steps. Makes it look simple, doesn't he?
Probably just how far I go back, just giving that time to steady, and then sort of focusing on the goal, and then hope to kick it. At the start of the year, I definitely had goals for the year ahead. Had goals to make the state team, and then also average a certain amount of goals, and towards the end of the year, able to tick some of them off. It's been great. It's definitely a dream since a young child. So just have any opportunity to play at that level, and have that high intent coaching as well. I think it would be great.
That was Jai Amos. Cal, had some good guests so far. What have you learned? What's the big thing you've taken away so far?
Look, we've had some interesting chats, haven't we? And both Adrian Caruso from the Giants and Kinnear Beatson from the Swans have given a good insight into what goes into the mind of recruiters this week. And it's a tough gig, Rolls, and it's a tougher gig this year than it's probably been in a long time, because not only did they not have a lot of these players' vision from last year, they've barely seen some Victorians for this year as well. And as we know, most recruiting teams are based in Victoria. Obviously, there's scouts scattered around the country on part-time bases and these type of arrangements. But for the best part, the main recruiting teams from Victoria haven't been able to get out of the state to go and watch some footy live. So it just makes for some big calls and some more unknown about this year's draft than probably ever before. And let's hope next year we get a clean run at it, because if there's some more challenges next year with fixturing, it's going to be really difficult to, work out who the best players are next year on the basis of no under-16s games for a lot of them, an under-17s carnival that was cut short, and next year, who knows? We hope that that's behind us at this point now as a country and state, but you can never tell the future. But throwing all that into the mix makes it difficult for clubs to be able to rank some of these guys beyond the first handful, and that's why there is an evenness to the 2021 pool. There's absolutely no doubt that right at the top end, there's some guns that emerged pretty early. There's some great storylines in there. I think everyone sort of takes for granted now, the Mac Andrew storyline that he's come from the Melbourne Next Generation Academy. He was on the verge of that sort of top 20, top 30 group at the start of the season. Potentially then he plays a couple of games through Dandenong Stingrays and all of a sudden has skyrocketed into top 5.
Because there would have been periods this year where the Demons, particularly probably his bottom age year, and then earlier this season where the Demons probably thought they legitimately had him in their grasp. But now
he hadn't played a part of any Vic Country sort of level until this year. So he hadn't been a part of those academy programs, and that's where the rules have worked against the Demons on this occasion. But there's his story. There's the Finn Callahan story of that practice game at Sandringham, where it was an intra-club game, and I remember standing next to someone at a club, and they just said, "Whoa!" Like there was that real whoa moment about this sidestep that he did in the wet, kicked a long goal from 50, and did it with absolute ease. And at that point forward, he's kept getting better, and he's grown. He's 191 centimetres, so his story is fantastic in itself. And then there's the Sam Darcy story where he trained until he trained at the Bulldogs earlier this year, and I think that's probably where the Bulldogs ears probably pricked up and thought, "Oh, this guy's got some ability." He trained there in January and started to show the ability that we saw probably emerge in April, May, June of him as a 204. I think he's 205 centimetre now, key forward. And I watched him at school level, and there was some amazing games. I think we'll come into the studio at that point for AFL Exchange and talking about Sam Darcy as a potential first-round pick. Then all of a sudden he kicks 6 in a Vic Metro trial game, and it's like, oh, okay, he might be right on the top 5. So there's always these stories, and these three are three of the best, particularly if they're three in the top 5. When you enter the year with Jason Horne-Francis, who's absolutely deserving of this one of the top players in the draft, and as is Nick Dacos, and that sort of comparison will be lasting forevermore, I think, in a lot of ways. They're very different, but also equally driven and equally talented. So it's going to be a fascinating sort of draft crop to follow. And then you throw in the fact that there's the Josh Sin types who've played 6 games in 2 years. There's Campbell Chesser, who's probably played less than that. After knee injuries this year, Sin had ankle and hamstring problems. There's Tom Brown, who didn't play last year, then had 12 weeks out with his syndesmosis. Where would these guys have gone had they got a full season in?
Last year we had Luke Pedlar, who came from the Clouds 48 hours before the draft and was ultimately a top 10 pick on the night going to the Crows. Do you envisage... I think at this stage last year, probably no one envisaged Luke Pedlar being a top 10 pick, but do you think there's one out there?
We'd started to get a bit of a read on Luke Pedlar at this point, but there was a lot of clubs interested in Luke Pedlar too, and there was some moving parts last year. And to be honest, the difficulty last year was that Essendon had 3 straight picks, so you weren't really quite sure of which way they were going to go. What needs did they need to cover? They had a fair few to sort of break in at that point. So that was a difficulty of working out last year's group. There's no doubt about that. This year, the cat and mouse that we talk about is, the Freo, Richmond Freo pick. Maybe they're after the same players. Maybe they're not, though. So that's where you can never read the minds of another club. And in the end, the best policy generally is always to pick the player that you like most. And because I always say this to clubs when I can, the clubs don't, and they know this as well, that clubs don't select players based on other clubs liking them. They like the player because they like them, and that's why they pick them. So, yeah, it's certainly going to be a very interesting night on Wednesday, and I can't wait to see the 2, the 3, the 4, the 5 players that are sort of left on the board and who everyone's scrambling for on Thursday as well. So
always happens, doesn't it?
and all that drama will be captured on afl.com.au on Wednesday night and Draft Night Live with Matt Edwards, myself, and yourself. Mm-hmm. And then again on Thursday for every pick and all the analysis there. So it's going to be a lot of fun. Speaking of fun, though.
Oh, God.
Were we just holding this off?
I'm not sure if this was like this is always the most exciting part of my year or the most terrifying part.
You're nervous, aren't you?
Always nervous. And this one for extra significance, which we can take you into soon.
Right.
Because it involves my hero.
What are we talking about? So we're talking about our draft song. So this started 2019, which feels like a lifetime ago at AFL House. And the background to this is that the day before, I'd put out a tweet saying, today is going to be the day, .. #Phantom Draft. Yeah. And one of our very loyal listeners put together basically a little rhyme based on Wonderwall using the draft notes. And today is going to be the day that, they're going to tell us what they're doing at pick 2 type of thing. Yeah. So, that year's song was Wonderwall, but it was said maybe the Crows are going to take McCasey because after all, they just need a tall.
Yep.
So that was that one. And that was pretty successful.
It was a nice one. Yeah, it was nice. It went to another strength though.
I felt like it lifted though in 2020 where we managed to sneak in about 20 names in one song. And
that was the perfect song, to be fair.
It was a good song, actually. We Didn't Start the Fire by Billy Joel. And we changed that, of course, to The Dogs Are Going to Get Jamara. And that was a good moment, and I think that went pretty well.
Tom Powell tracking well, but not Morrell.
Yes, correct. Who will be this year's Will Day? I think Mitch is still trying to spit that line out. So we've had a couple of options for this year, and just I want to take you through a couple of the options we had for this year. No, they were good.
Yeah.
So I've been really desperate to work this one in. I couldn't work it out though. I wanted to do "Lose Yourself" by Eminem.
That was one from the start.
Yeah, and knees weak, arms are heavy, vomit on the sweater already. Josh Rochelle.
That was the only line you had, and it didn't make any sense. You just had that Josh Rochelle line up your sleeve, and you were sticking to it for the entire year.
So I had that there, and then we had "Good Riddance" by Green Day.
Yeah,
that was going to be. He's sometimes unpredictable. He's sometimes out of sight. He might just be the next Nat 5. About Jason Horn, obviously. Was there any others? We had Leonard Cohen put forward by Hallelujah.
Yep.
Horn Francis.
Yeah, that was a good one. I can't think of any more. We were trying to think early days of how to work Nick Dacos into a chorus unsuccessfully.
So we've built this up a fair bit. Anyway, so
we're delaying the inevitable.
We are a bit delaying the inevitable. Do we want to do it again? No, we want to do it. Okay, this is our song for...
Are we telling the audience what we're singing?
Yeah, we have to. Yeah. We are singing Horn in the SA, which is obviously a rip-off of Born in the USA by Bruce Springsteen. So, all right, we doing it? Born down in Adelaide town, the first kick he got, he was best on ground. North just get beat too much, at least they got this kid just coming up.
Horn in the SA, Horn in the SA, Horn in the SA, Horn in the SA. The Dogs, they know they're getting Sam. The Pies have Dacos in their hand. Rochelle, Ward, Hobbs, where they'll land. The Suns want it all. Max their man. Horn in the SA. Horn in the SA. Horn in the SAs. Horn in the SA.
Here we go. The Giants are set to nab Finn. Port and Brisbane looking at Josh Sin. Bolters, sliders, pick swaps. Here's the facts. Let's just hope they've got their COVID vax.
Horn in the SA. Horn in the SA. Horn in the SA.
It's
Horn in the SA.
That's where we need some fake crowd noise jumps
Our producer
in.
Kane is, I can't tell if he's embarrassed or if he's happy or...
That's us. I'm not sure if I'm embarrassed or happy. But
if he wants his name involved in this production. What is it?
Hey, great work. That was good, I think, anyway. I'm looking forward to our feedback, which should come through thick and fast. Generally, it does if it's ordinary. Generally, it doesn't if it's good.
Well, last year was good. This year, I'm worried.
Are you?
I'm worried just because it's a bit of a slower one. Yeah. There's a bit more singing involved.
I think we gave it all.
I think we gave it all. I'm pretty happy with it.
Good job, mate.
Get in touch. You know our Twitter handles. Maybe don't actually tweet us. I've got things to do tonight.
My first text message dropped this morning. It was 7:03. What time the Phantom dropping? Tonight. And the first tweet I actually got was last night at about midnight saying it's the night before Christmas. So I'm glad other people feel that way.
So can I don't want to sort of damn you with too much praise here, but I caught up with a mate yesterday for coffee, and at the end of our catch-up, the last thing they asked me, they were just like, before you go, when's Cal's Phantom dropping? So now I get questions about when your Phantom's dropping as well, which doesn't help my life. I don't want to be answering, I'm not your PA. I don't want to be answering that.
Yeah, well, look, it was an institution that I took over and was a huge thing before then, and had been built up, and clearly it's one piece of content, but it's a thing that people really enjoy reading, and there is a level of pressure to it. There's no doubt about that. And think last year you saw my face melt live on air when North Melbourne picked Will Phillips.
Are you happy they've got pick 1 this year and you know what they're going to do?
Well, it does make it easy when Jason Horne-Francis is such a good player and he's right at the top rung there. So, it does make it a little bit less stressful this time around. And even this time last year, I was still trying to work out what the Crows were going to do with that, pick if they didn't bid.
Yes.
Or if they bid or not, and who they were going to take, Thilthorpe versus Logan McDonald. And that debate, they're obviously interested in Elijah Hollands as well. So that was one that this time last year we'll sort of racking our brains around what you do. But look, the Phantom Draft is just one piece of the puzzle, and you also know you've got to be careful sometimes about what you're being told and what you're taking in and what you're using and what you have to sort of leave to the side. Which clubs are doing dummy interviews at this time of the year, which do happen. Which players are in that group of guys who the question marks are out on and who want to go into state. Which players are the guys who have made it clear that they're very happy to move or certainly would prefer to stay in their hometown. So I think that, you put all the pieces together and you come up with something, but it's a difficult task. And as we mentioned before, it's enjoyable, but I'm not sure if I'll be looking at Twitter tonight.
Question for you. Would you ever incorporate a live trade if you just knew one was going to happen? So say you knew that you'd got a word from the Crows that they were 100% going to be trading 4 for 7 and 15. Would you put that in your Phantom?
Yeah, probably.
You can.
Yeah.
Because I don't think you've done one before.
Well, no.
Because we haven't really known about one pre-draft.
And it's a risk. You're putting it out there by putting that one through, aren't you? But
yeah.
Because as we know, the house of cards can fall very, very quickly at that point. But I do think that, there'll be some movement. And particularly, it's almost worth a Phantom Draft light on Thursday, because the names and order of those picks. And looking back to 2018-19, where you could do the second day trading, the trades from 20 to 30, there's so much movement in that period of the draft.
It's tough,
so much movement, because there's also a level of communication between the clubs at that point where they sort of know who each is going to look at and who likes who. So that does make it a little bit easier in some ways.
All right, we've had some great guests on today. We've got one more coming up in Ben Williams, manager, obviously, of Jason Horne-Francis. Join us again tomorrow, though, 12:10 p.m. Australian Eastern Daylight Time. It's Club Day tomorrow, Cal. We've got a lot of clubs coming in. Richmond, Hawthorn, Freo, Adelaide, Melbourne. They're all coming in and we're going to hear from them. We're back again on Wednesday, obviously, as well. We'll have more guests, more players, more agents, more clubs joining us on Wednesday, 12:10 p.m. Australian Eastern Daylight Time, and then from 6:30 p.m. on Wednesday night, Draft Night Live, as you mentioned a couple of times tonight. Every pick live as they happen with myself, you, Cal Toomey, our draft expert, and the great Nat Edwards, who is across this as well and has been involved all through the year on the Road to the Draft podcast.
So some names tomorrow for the supporters of these clubs. We've got Matt Clark from Richmond coming into the studio, which will be great to get a gauge on what they're doing at pick 7 and pick 15. They've got 5 picks in the top 30, so I can't wait for that chat. Mark McKenzie from the Hawks. Hopefully he gives a little bit of an insight into what they're doing.
This is your chance, Cal. This is your chance.
It's my chance. Justin Longmuir, the coach of the Fremantle Footy Club. We know they're stacked and will be big winners out of this draft with their 2 picks in the top 10 and 3 in the first 20. So interested to see what his take on that is and how the Dockers are shaping up ahead of 2022. Hamish Ogilvie, the Adelaide Footy Club recruiting boss, will be in, as well as Jason Taylor, and we'll also have some players coming through. And then on Wednesday, we've got North Melbourne coming on, we've got Collingwood coming on, we've got Steve Knoll from Brisbane, who's got
2 first-round picks.
2 first-round picks out of a side that was, again, deep in the finals. So, looking forward to what we can serve up over the next couple of days, and there's something there for everyone.
All right, Cal, we've got another very special guest on Draft Night Countdown this year. It's player agent Ben Williams, who looks after the likely number 1 pick, Jason Horne-Francis. Ben, thanks for joining us on Draft Night Countdown.
Thanks, Riley. Thanks, Cal. Thanks for having me.
How have you seen Jason handle this year? We chatted to him earlier today, and he's obviously a very confident, mature kid. How have you seen him handle the 2021 season?
Yeah, he's exceptionally impressive young man, Jace. He just takes it all in his stride, and pressure is like water off a duck's back with him. He just goes about his business, and obviously he's been highly touted for 2 years. So you think when you're that highly touted for 2 years and people are used to seeing you perform well, you think that the pressure at some stage would get to you, but for him, he seems to thrive off it.
Have you seen any moment at all this year, Ben, where it has become a little bit too much for him, or, as you say, has he just been able to plough through it?
Yeah, he's been really impressive. He's basically been able to plough through it. He had probably a 2-week period earlier in the year where he played 2 back-to-back consecutive games that he wasn't that impressed with. So he just went back to basics and trusted the process, and then the following week played a really good game. So guys like that, they're really special, and they know exactly what they have to do to push through pressure and push through challenging times.
Tell us about your relationship with Jace and when you started to get to know him and how you've helped him sort of guide through what's been, a huge couple of seasons in his life and in his career, because he's on the verge of something pretty special. He's going to be the first non-Victorian number one for a decade or so, and it's a great achievement.
Yeah, we're very fortunate that we've got a close relationship with Jace, and obviously with his dad Fabian, his mum Trish, and we know his little siblings really well. We've spent a lot of time with them this year because obviously someone like Jace, you have to do quite a bit for those sort of guys. With media, and obviously they have a million interviews and they've got lots of things to do. So you're having a lot of touch points and a lot of face-to-face time with them. So no, we're very fortunate that they've come on board with us, and we've developed such a close, special relationship.
Now, I think a few clubs during the year had their eyebrows raised when North were taking their time to interview him, and I know a lot of clubs around that mark were asking why and what it led to. Have you always been confident that he was their man at pick one?
I wouldn't necessarily say confident. Like, I know you've had some other guests on today, and there's always a couple of people that are spoken about to be taken so early. Obviously, Sam Darcy and Nick Dacos and those guys, and even Finn Callahan. So that group of players have been spoken about a lot. And, you're starting to think, oh, God, are they actually going to reach out and make an approach to him? But then eventually they did, and I think they were keeping their powder dry because they wanted their first communication to be face-to-face. But unfortunately, with the situation, which we've all become too far used to with the 2020 and 2021 with COVID, they didn't really get the chance. So they have had several meetings now, and that was via Zoom. So, yeah, long story short, I think they just were waiting to get the best opportunity to see him physically.
Ben, you mentioned Fabian Francis and the impact he's had on Jace. How big has that been? Earlier this year, Jace added Francis to his name, obviously, and has had such a close bond to Fabian. Tell us about that from your eyes.
Yeah, they've got an unbelievable relationship, and Jace is so lucky that he's been raised by someone who has obviously had a long career in the AFL, and Fabian did some things in his career that he was really happy with, and he also did some things which he wasn't happy with. So I think he's been able to share all of those experiences with Jace, both off and on field, and he's been a great mentor, but most importantly, a fantastic father to him.
How does draft night go for Jace, and how busy are you going to be on Wednesday night at Adelaide Oval? Are you just taking a back seat, Ben, or are you going to be hands-on working him through the media and everything that comes with being such a prize pick?
Yeah, we'll take a back seat initially, but obviously, as you know, that the rest of his night's going to be engulfed with a lot of media work, so we'll have to be involved with that. But also, we've got other players that hopefully get picked, like Nazaya Wanganeen, so we've also got to do some stuff for them and share the experience with them. And those boys are fortunate enough that they've been invited to the Adelaide event at Adelaide Oval, and it's going to be really interesting to see the three events sort of all play out on TV in Victoria, WA, and SA, and thankfully, we'll get to share the moment with Nazire and Jace.
Ben, just the last question on Jace. I mean, everyone always talks about, and the question this time of year is always about the move interstate. I mean, it's been known for so long that he was going to North Melbourne. That hasn't really come up as an issue. But how do you think he actually will go with the move to Victoria?
Oh, I think he's been well prepared. If he obviously ends up in Melbourne, he's been preparing himself for that, or to go anywhere. And the programs these days are so good in educating the kids. And in most traditional years, as you know, all these young players are playing games all across the country throughout, their normal championships years. So they are really well prepared. And the AFLPA and the AFL have done a great job in the sense of where if they go into state, they get their rent paid for the first year. Their families have 8 return flights per year to go and see their sons. So there will be lots of contact points and contact moments for Jason and his family next year, which will inevitably make it much easier for him, I think.
You mentioned Isaiah Wanganeen-Malira. What's your read on where he finds his draft spot?
Yeah, he's a funny one, Isaiah, isn't he? Because everyone's speaking about the first sort of handful, and then there's probably a glut of about 10 other ones who are sort of in that next bracket. So wouldn't surprise me if he went as early as, let's say, 6, and, you know, he could go through to 14, 15 and anywhere in between there. So I really couldn't tell you, but I think there's probably 5 or 6 clubs where he could end up at on the night.
Has he had many more interviews recently, or have you gotten engaged through that advance? I know speaking to Isaiah Wanganeen-Malira recently on Road to the Draft, I think he'd had about 20 interviews across the season, so it had been a fairly big year of Zoom calls for him, but any more of late?
Yeah, he had about 2 weeks ago, he had 3 in the one day. And then, he had a phone conversation with someone last week. He may have one in the next one or 2 days. Obviously, there's still 48 hours to play out. But that being said, that doesn't always mean that the player's going to end up there. I remember reading somewhere that Will Phillips, I think, didn't speak to North since about April or May last year. So,
yep.
You just don't know. And every club does it differently, and sometimes they're trying to put out a bit of a fake smoke bomb, so to speak. So you just don't know. You roll with the punches.
And what about Isaiah in terms of moving? Obviously, the Crows have had a look at pick 4. There's probably more likelihood he's still available later on. How has he sort of got his head around the fact he's more likely than not to move out of Adelaide?
Yeah, I think he's well prepared for it, as well prepared as he can be. Obviously, he's grown up in a footy family. When his father was at St Kilda, that's Terry Millerer. They lived over there, and his uncle Gavin's played at Essendon and also Port. So it's just such it's just something that he's come to terms with for a long time, because it's just their normal day-to-day for their family. So he's prepared, and if someone interstate picks him, he can't wait to start his adventure and hopefully make an impact at his new AFL club.
You mentioned before, Ben, about the COVID situation and North not actually being able to meet face-to-face with Jace throughout the year. When do you expect him, should he get picked by North Melbourne with pick 1, which we all think is going to happen on Wednesday night, when do you expect him to actually make the move and join his teammates for training?
I think with the non-West Australian kids, it's probably less of an issue, because obviously I think from tomorrow, basically all the other states bar WA are, let's say, COVID-friendly with each other. So I would assume if North do pick him, I assume he would be on a plane within 48, 72 hours and doing the first block of his pre-season, and hopefully he's able to come home for Christmas.
Ben, we just had Kinnear Beatson on the show. I'm not sure if you were listening to his chat. Were you? Were you on board at that point?
No, I wasn't.
Oh, that's when you say yes, Ben. Come on. No. We did ask him about Isaac Heaney's contract, and he said, as one of the leading free agents in the pool next year, that Charlie Gardner had opened up some talks. Where does it sit from your perspective? You're Isaac's manager. Where does it sit from that end?
Yeah, it's all very preliminary. Obviously, I haven't been able to sit down face-to-face with Charlie for several months, so I think we'll try to do that either sometime after the draft period, or even after the Christmas break, and probably have a bit more of a lengthy discussion. But at the moment, things have been very preliminary.
Well, Ben, thank you for your time today on Draft Night Countdown. Enjoy the night Wednesday night with your boys, Jason and Isaiah, and good luck with everything on the night.
Thanks for having me, guys.
Thanks, Ben.
That was Ben Williams, their manager of Jason Horne-Francis, who we believe is going to be the number 1 pick on Wednesday night, or who we know is going to be the number 1 pick on Wednesday night, let's be honest, and Isaiah Wanganeen-Malira, who's a bit more of an interesting one. It's interesting, he said he probably sees his draft range start at 6. Cal, do you think he'd still be there, and do you think it'd be something Port Adelaide would consider at 12 as a South Australian local?
Yes. I think if he's there at 12, that he'd be the strongest of strong chances to be not there at 13.
And do you think he'll be there at 12?
That's the question, isn't it? And
yes, it is.
Honestly, probably not.
Yeah, okay.
No, I think that there's other clubs before then that would be looking at him, and St Kilda, West Coast. You'd have to have a look at Essendon. Clearly, there's a link there with Gavin Wanganeen. His uncle was, Brownlow medalist and premiership player at the club. His cousin Tex Wanganeen is probably unlikely to be drafted. He's most likely to end up getting a train-on spot at the Bombers over summer. So there's some clear links there for the Bombers. And if you're Essendon watcher, you'd probably say that they need some extra class through the midfield too. Look, he's right in that group, and I can't see it getting through to Port Adelaide, but I think if he was there, then the romance of that, as well as just the quality of a player that he is, he would have to be really considered. It'd be funny if Port Adelaide end up picking up a Burgoyne and a Wanganeen in the one draft year, but
like going back to 2004.
Yeah, it is a little bit. And just on the father-sons, that is certainly a point in discussion where the bids come for these guys.
So where do you see it?
So there's so much talk around Dacos and Darcy clearly right at the top. But beyond that, there's 3 other father-sons who have been nominated as national draft picks, and Jackson Archer at North Melbourne, the son of Glenn Archer, clearly. Tajai Woden, who's the son of Shane Woden at Melbourne, and also Jace Burgoyne, who weighed things up but ultimately nominated as a father-son to Port Adelaide, the son of Peter Burgoyne. So a nephew, clearly, of Sean Burgoyne, who just gone back to Port Adelaide in an off-field role. I think the bids for Burgoyne and Woden in particular are just most likely to be 40+. I think that's probably where it ends up. Essendon have had a little bit of a look at Burgoyne, I think, but in the end, they probably have the picks where at the moment they're 11 and then in the 50s. It might be one of the 50s picks that ends up coming in a couple of spots after the bids wipe out some other picks. So that is the options around that sort of range for them. And Woden, well, the Demons' last pick live, they're likely to take 3 picks. If they don't get a bid on, then they automatically join their club via the last pick that they've got.
Yeah.
And their last pick's in the 40s, and that's probably where we think Woden will end up. And he's had a really good second half of the season to push himself into that range. He's a hard worker. Everyone you speak to raves about his character. So there's no doubt that he has a lot of what it takes to be a competitor at the top level. And the D's haven't had a father-son since 2014. They actually haven't had that many father-sons throughout the history for such a big and famous club. And
point, actually.
One of the oldest clubs. The last one was Billy Stretch, of course, probably their best father-son, played in the premiership this year in Jack Viney, and there's a lot of conjecture around him. He was a part of the previous bidding system back in 2012, I think it was, off the top of my head. So, yeah, it's been a little bit of time between drinks for them for father-sons. And then there's Jackson Archer, who I expect will just be let through to be the North Melbourne last pick. They're likely to use 5 picks. He's likely to be the 5th, and that'd be the way. While we're on bidding, a message for St Kilda fans out there: stress less.
You reckon?
Stress less.
Because this fascinates me because, one, partly because of the new rules. We're obviously talking about Machito Owens here. One, because of the new rules. 2, because I've watched a fair bit of him. He's obviously had this massive growth spurt, and it's turned him into such a hard competitive player, and I probably think he is a top 20 player at this year's draft. And I think a lot of clubs probably would think that, whether or not. But as I had one